I'm not sure if Hoyoverse knows this, so I'm going to try and keep my voice down so they don't hear me this time. But the Cryo MC and the weapon that they're getting are kind of like really broken, to the point that if you have some of the right tools in place, the Traveler might be the strongest character on your account, which compared to how the last few Travelers have been treated, it's nice that we're finally getting lore accurate Traveler. Hello there, Flip here, and today here is my Cryo main character video. I'm sorry it took so long, in which we are of course going to be breaking down what the Cryo Traveler does and how good they are, discussing the Cryo Traveler's signature weapon too, and then we'll close out the video by showing tons of calculations, highlighting just how strong the Cryo Traveler is as both a support and main DPS. But before we do that, as always, if at any points during the video you're entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin's meta, and I'll try to keep you updated. Shout out to all my lovely channel members, I really appreciate your support, it means the world to me. I hope you're all excited for 7.0 next week, and that's enough yapping, let's just get right into it. So, the Cryo Traveler is the Traveler. I'm sure you are all familiar with who that is, but before diving into the specifics about the Cryo Traveler's kit, there are some other things regarding them that you may not know, which add on to making the Cryo Traveler itself even stronger. For one, to try and not spoil anything, when you complete a certain quest in Nordcry, since there wasn't any kind of lunar traveler or anything, the Traveler instead receives a bunch of buffs to make them stronger, depending on the amount of elements you've resonated with. So basically which statue of the Sevens have you interacted with. This will give you permanent stat buffs to your Traveler regardless of the element you use with them, in which I'll just put all the buffs up on screen, but this is such a ludicrous amount of stats to give. For the important ones, you're getting 10 crit rate from Onimo, 20% ER from Electro, 60 EM from Dendra, which matches for stellar damage, 20% attack from Pyro, which is what the Traveler scales off of, and in 7.0 we can resonate with the Cryo statue and get 20 crit damage. So yes, pretty insane stat lineup to have. It's the equivalent of getting 3 to 4 artifact substats per stat, and only they are benefiting from something like this compared to other characters. And speaking of something else only the Travelers can benefit from, I guess we'll talk about the new weapon, Xyphanes. And I kid you not, this might be the most broken weapon in the game, with the only caveat being that the passive only works with the Traveler, and that's no longer really even a bad thing with the Cryo Traveler, as they're so good. And for other sword characters that are attack scaling, even just having the 5-star base attack with crit rate is already putting this weapon on par with most of the best 4-star options. So even if you don't use Traveler, this is still going to be a good weapon to have, but ideally just use both the Traveler with this weapon. On release, you're going to be able to get this weapon to refinement level 3, in which you're going to be getting 42 crit damage just for being the Traveler, and hopefully resonating with all 7 of the statues. And on top of this, you get a 24% attack increase whenever you hit an opponent. With any attack, even when you're off field, the only thing that matters is that the Traveler is hitting something. And on top of the 24% attack, whenever you hit something, you're also going to regenerate 5 energy, and this can trigger every 5 seconds. So depending on the team, you're also getting 10 to 15 energy for free. I don't know if I can stress enough just how insane of a stat spread this is, and how much more I'm shocked that Hoyoverse is giving this out for free to an actually good character, but the Traveler having access to this does play a part in why they're so strong. This is the strongest a signature weapon has ever been for a character, and I know a lot of my viewers don't even pull signature weapons for their DPS anyways. So yes, very good. And another huge thing about the Traveler in general now is just the fact that they don't really have energy issues anymore. From the 10 to 15 energy you get from this weapon per rotation, on top of the 20% ER you're getting for free, on top of the fact that every single Traveler has some kind of ER refund passive or constellation, I feel like you're going to have a very comfortable time using the Traveler, as pretty much across the board they have low to no energy requirements. And now let's get into the specifics of the Cryo Traveler's kit. As I have said in previous videos, the Cryo Traveler has 2 different playstyles, depending on whether you put them in Stellar Conduct teams, where they will primarily be a DPS, or you put them in Stellar Swirl teams, where they function as more of a sub-DPS or support. Now for once a character actually has a useful basic attack, the Cryo Traveler, like the other Travelers, has a special charge attack that they can use every 15 seconds, that scales with an additional 140% of their attack, on top of the base motion value, and the condition for having the strong charge attack is anyone on your team dealing Stellar Swirl or Stellar Conduct damage 3 times. When this charge attack is unleashed, it will match the Stellar team archetype you are playing to either deal Stellar Swirl or Stellar Conduct damage, on top of generating 2 stacks of Frost Glow for the Traveler. Now Frost Glow is going to be a mechanic that ties into the rest of the Cryo Cryo Traveler's kit, and your main sources of Frost Glow generation are going to be from the Elemental skill, as well as the special charge attack I just mentioned. The Cryo Traveler skill functions differently depending on if they're in a Stellar Conduct team or not. After doing an initial hit of regular cryo damage, if you aren't in a Stellar Conduct team, a Cryo Orb is going to follow you around, and every 2 seconds will fire 2 ice crystals at opponents. And when opponents are hit by an ice crystal, this will give you a stack of Frost Glow. And yes, all of these cryo turret hits are regular cryo damage, and the base duration is 12 seconds. But if the Traveler is being used in a Stellar Conduct team, instead of being turret hits, you will now get coordinated attacks that will only activate when the Traveler themselves hits an opponent with a normal or charge attack. And each of these coordinated attacks will also generate Frost Glow. And this is pretty much where the main separation in the Cryo Traveler's kit happens, as in Stellar Conduct teams the Cryo Traveler cannot generate Frost Glow from off-field, incentivizing more of an on-field DPS playstyle, which is further pushed through the Ascension 1 passive that gives you a Cryo Infusion whenever your skill is active, giving the Traveler on-field capabilities that they don't get in Stellar Swirl teams. Now with all this talk about Frost Glow, what does it actually do? The main use of Frost Glow is going to be to power up the Traveler's Elemental Burst, as each stack of Frost Glow adds extra motion value to the burst, and when you have 8 stacks of Frost Glow, which is the maximum you can possess at any time, this will increase the amount of hits the Cryo Traveler's burst has from 3 to 5 hits, giving you 2 extra hits, which considering the fact that the Cryo Traveler's burst can deal stellar damage is a very big deal. So you are going to try to work towards unleashing a maxed Frost Glow burst every time you're going to use it. Now to quickly go over their Ascension passives, the first one is the Cryo Infusion I talked about, and keep in mind, unlike the special charge attack, these are just going to be regular cryo hits. The Traveler's second Ascension passive has just been stolen from Sandrone, in which you just get 160 elemental mastery based on your attack. You need 2000 attack to max this out, which is going to be extremely easy from all the things that Traveler gets. And the Traveler's other passives are the fact that they enable both stellar reactions and the special charge attack I talked about as well. And now to get into the Constellations of the Traveler, as they'll all be given out for free, C1 is just going to be a free 10 energy via doing the Traveler's charge attack and burst. C2 is a 60 EM buff to your active character only if they take damage from the Traveler's skill, and you will get an extra 60 on top of this if the active character triggers a stellar reaction while the buff is active. C2 is going to be the stopping point on release, and you're going to have to wait a few versions, possibly up until 7.3, to be able to max out your Traveler's Constellations, which like with the weapon does kind of suck as you're losing around 10 to 15% team DPS just for the content not being available currently to max out the Traveler. But regarding their other Constellations, C4 adds 3 seconds onto the elemental skill, and the C6 gives a stellar damage bonus up to 40% based on the amount of Frost Glow stacks you have. So thankfully nothing too insane quality of life wise is locked behind the Traveler's Constellations. It still sucks that their max potential is kind of locked though. And in regards to how you're actually going to play the Traveler, it does stay the same between both kits for the most part. In Stellar Swirl teams you just use your skill, do a charge attack and then burst, and this will get out all of your damage and buffs. The only thing to keep in mind is that on your very first rotation, you won't have your special charge attack or Frost Glow stacks built up, so you can really just skip doing the charge attack on your very first rotation, as it won't be doing anything. And in regards to the Stellar Conduct Traveler, as a main DPS, I think their playstyle is extremely funny, because all of their damage comes from their charge attack and burst, which you do at the very start of your rotations, as these are your Stellar Conduct hits, and after that they have no more, they just do regular cryo damage and become an actual regular dude, to where you're just on-fielding them to build the resources for your next charge attack and burst. This is very similar to Flint's gameplay loop, but a bit worse. Essentially, you can't really do much more combo optimizations to make your Cryo Traveler feel better. If you fail to meet a damage breakpoint or just miss your burst, that's the run gone, which with my experience with Flint's just isn't a very nice feeling, as after your Cryo Traveler gets all of their damage out, you're relying on your sub DPSs to just do the rest of the carrying for the team for the next 15 seconds until you get all your stuff back. So while the Cryo Traveler is a tactical nuke and does so much damage in such a short period of time, which can be good for front loading or in short boss phases, I'm not really sure how intuitive that is going to feel to actually play, but they should just do enough damage to where that doesn't really matter anyways. Now before getting into all the team calculations I know you guys want to see, I wanted to touch on how you build the Traveler. Use the Traveler sword. It is the best possible weapon they could use, there is no reason not to use it on them. It is better than every other 5-star and 4-star option available. I don't even want to entertain the thought of showing you an infographic for this. If you are using the Traveler, you are going to use this weapon. And for artifact sets as a main DPS, they will use the Stellar Conduct set. But as a Stellar Swirl support, because Hoyoverse removed the compatibility in using Verdescent or the Scarlet Proof set on Cryo characters, this does limit your options a decent bit. But essentially, if the new Furnace set is free, you should put this on the Cryo Traveler, even though the Cryo Traveler doesn't have full uptime on the set, as the set effect only lasts for 12 seconds, and the Cryo Traveler does one stellar hit every 15-ish seconds, potentially even longer gaps. The only reason why the Stellar Swirl set would be free in the first place is if you aren't using Odette. So the active window for when Stellar Swirl damage is being dealt is only going to be the Traveler and your DPS, in which their full damage window should be buffed by this, so it doesn't become that much of an issue. But if you are playing a Stellar Swirl team alongside Odette, then you want to give Odette the Furnace set, in which the Cryo Traveler will hold Tenacity to buff Odette's and their own damage by 20%. And since we're talking about Stellar Swirl teams, I may as well just show the calculations for them first, in which, looking at the best current Mizuki team I've calculated, the Traveler is of course going to be a part of that, and you see quite a strong decline in damage trying to replace the Cryo Traveler for someone like Chi-Chi. Even though Chi-Chi has strong team-wide buffing giving a 50% Stellar Swirl damage bonus, the thing they pale in comparison to the Traveler is going to be their damage, and Cryo Traveler uniquely does a lot of damage in Stellar Swirl teams. And to explain why, I'm going to quickly recap what the reaction does. When you trigger a swirl with a Cryo Swirl enabler on your team, you get two types of damage from Vortex Cryo damage and regular Onimo Swirl transformative damage. The Onimo Swirl damage will happen every time your Onimo character applies Onimo, and the Cryo Vortex Stellar Swirl damage will take 3 seconds before exploding, and if you manage to apply Onimo 3 times before that happens, the Vortex will be leveled up and deal more damage. Now, where the Cryo Traveler comes into this is the fact that both of the transformative Stellar Swirl damage will take into account the stats of everyone who applied Cryo when the reaction was triggered, with the main stats being looked at being Stellar Swirl bonus, crit, and elemental mastery. It then ranks the damage based on who would do the most Stellar Swirl damage to the least Stellar Swirl damage, and then the final reaction damage will be distributed, and the characters that deal the least Stellar Swirl damage make up less of the final transformative damage hit. And because, as we talked about, the Cryo Traveler just gets so much insane stats from the weapon, the resonance buffs, the weapon passive, and so on, they're usually going to have the highest or at least second highest Stellar Swirl damage contribution to your team, and therefore they're going to add a lot of damage to the final Stellar Swirl reaction. So on top of their direct Stellar Swirl damage from their charge attack and burst, they're also adding a ton of damage to the transformative Stellar Swirl reaction damage, making them a very strong and important sub DPS even on Tenacity. Sadly, this isn't enough to make them better in Stellar Swirl teams than Odette, as 1-to-1 you would still rather have Odette due to the buff she received that made her decently better than the Cryo Traveler, which kind of sucks, but whatever. Even for cope options, the Cryo Traveler is still fine in Stellar Swirl teams. But yes, currently they're a very important part into making this team archetype really strong. And the same thing is going to extend if you want to make Sandrone your Stellar Swirl DPS instead of Mizuki. The Cryo Traveler and Odette are the best together, and losing your Odette from your Stellar Swirl team is more impactful than losing the Traveler right now. Now, moving into talking about the Traveler as a Stellar Conduct character, before discussing him as a DPS, the Cryo Traveler can actually be used as a Stellar Conduct support, in which they do a pretty serviceable job if you wanted someone to be an Odette replacement for now in case you're skipping her. Because the Cryo Traveler doesn't generate Frost Glow while off field, I've seen a lot of people try and use rotations where the Cryo Traveler is on field for a decent amount of time to build up their Frost Glow, but I don't really think that's worth it over just using a much weaker burst and swapping off, since the Cryo Traveler isn't doing that much damage anyways. But yes, if you want them to function as a dead slot, for Sandrone and Risley specifically, since they're both characters who don't care about cryo application that much, you can use the Cryo Traveler there, and they function okay. Now, moving on to the Cryo Traveler as the Stellar Conduct DPS themselves, this is where they're going to shine a lot, and this is their best role. If you're someone who skipped Sandrone but still managed to get Yai and Odette, you can just slot the Cryo Traveler as your DPS, in which they're going to be competitive with both Sino and Risley. And when the eventual C6 R5 comes comes out. They're even going to be on par with Sandrone a little bit. One of the biggest benefits of the Cryo Traveler is the fact that they can run extremely short rotations. If you look at the Cryo Traveler's premium team, everyone is gated by a 15-second cooldown, and no one has to use their elemental bursts besides the Traveler, which also has a 15-second cooldown. This works in tandem with the fact that the Cryo Traveler only has 2 attacks you need to care about, being their special charge attack and burst. And once again, they just become a regular dude after that, only staying on field to wait for the 15 seconds, as well as build up the Frost Glow for the next rotation to unleash their nukes again. And if you want to discuss cost chesting or cost maxing, since the Cryo Traveler doesn't take up a cost because they aren't a limited character, if you get something like Odette's C1 to put them on par with the amount of limited cost you get from having to pull for Sandrone or Sino or Risley, you can technically make the argument that they're the strongest Stellar Conduct DPS to invest into cost-wise, and you just don't pull for a dedicated Stellar Conduct carry. But because no one really builds their account around cost, and I'm sure most people have already pulled for a Stellar Conduct carry by now, I don't really think this argument is going to hold up outside of hindsight, but it's just interesting to know, I guess. Now, looking at the performance of the Cryo Traveler, if you're missing one of the limited characters like Yai or Odette, since Yai already applies Electro for the Cryo Traveler, there are a numerous amount of subs that can be made in Odette's place, like Escoffier, Nicole, or Sucrose. Any flex slot that allows you to keep your rotations as short as possible will work fine, but in replacing Yai Miko, things do get a little more difficult. This is because the best Yai replacement in Alosha can't standardly be played in 15-second rotations due to their burst running on an 18-second cooldown, and if the Traveler has to extend rotations, because once again they just become a regular dude after unloading their charge attack and burst, their damage doesn't increase by adding 3 extra seconds, so your rotation is just getting longer for no real benefit. Thankfully though, I thought of a way to circumvent this issue, and hopefully it works the way I think it will in practice, but there are 2 traits of Alosha that can make him still optimal. For one, Alosha at C2 is going to have extremely long buff uptime. The way Alosha works is that you apply the Hunter's Mark to an enemy with your elemental skill, and then your burst doing damage will consume the Hunter Mark and apply the buff. And with Alosha C2, you're going to be able to constantly apply the mark and consume the mark multiple times during a burst cast. All of Alosha's buffs are gated around his Hunter's Mark, and the Hunter's Mark duration on an enemy, as well as the buff after consuming the mark, is going to last for 15 seconds. Because of the fact that Alosha's burst lasts for 20 seconds with C2, as long as the Hunter's Mark buff is getting refreshed towards the tail end of your rotation, it's still going to last a full 15 seconds. And because the 20 seconds that the burst lasts is already longer than your base rotation time, this 15-second reset of the buff is going to happen a few seconds into your next rotation anyways. So Alosha's buffs will effectively last 2 rotations, even if you cast it every other rotation. And the same thing happens with his Electro application as well. Since the Cryo Traveler, Odette, and Chi-Chi are all Cryo characters, you want to have constant Electro applications so that you don't lose the Pulsar field, in which case your characters stop doing Stellar Conduct damage and giving Stellar Conduct buffs, in which the only downtime you're really allowed in Stellar Conduct teams is around 4 seconds. But once again, using the rotation loop I have listed here, you are of course going to want to start your very first rotation by applying Electro with Alosha's skill so that you get Stellar Conduct started, and then right before Cryo Traveler takes the field, you're going to use Alosha's burst. This is going to cover the 10 seconds that the Cryo Traveler is on field, and then when cycling through Chi-Chi and Odette, you are now at around 14 seconds of the 20 seconds of Electro application you're getting from Alosha. And because Alosha's buffs and Electro application is still active, we can just skip using Alosha on rotations where his burst is active and swap back into Cryo Traveler, where his charge attack and burst are still going to be buffed by the Pulsar field. There is then going to be around 4 seconds where the Cryo Traveler is still on field, Alosha's buffs are still going to be active, but the Pulsar field is going to run out in 4 seconds due to the fact that you no longer have Electro application from Alosha. But when the Pulsar field is about to run out, you then swap off the Traveler into Alosha to reapply Electro with his skill, recreating the Pulsar field for the next 4 seconds, and then you can cycle through Chi-Chi and Odette, in which Alosha can burst again, and this should create a rotation in which the Pulsar field is active for like 99% of the time, with Alosha getting full buff uptime, and the Cryo Traveler losing no damage. And if this does end up working in practice, I'm a genius, I told you so, I'm so smart, best theory crafter in the world. And if this doesn't end up working, it's pre-release that happens. But yes, the Cryo Traveler is going to take a decent hit from losing Odette or Yai, but it isn't really the end of the world. And the Cryo Traveler still ends up having one of the best DPS performances in the game. So in conclusion, the Cryo MC is very good. This is the strongest free character we have ever gotten, being both an important important support and very strong DPS, competitive with the limited characters, all whilst having the best weapon in the game being paired alongside with them, which you're also going to be getting for free. So to anyone who did skip out on pulling for a stellar DPS, you are in luck, as you just get one of the strongest carries. And even if you're someone who's already speccing into stellar conduct teams, you're still going to be getting a very strong support for your stellar scroll teams. So I can't really think of a good reason for you not to build the Traveler. I guess the Traveler does somewhat suffer at a dolphin or whale level, as the main thing making the Traveler just such a strong character is the fact that they're being paired with this extremely strong weapon, on top of all the free stats they are given. But if you're someone who's already pulling for like early constellations or weapons of characters, in that case there's less of a reason to care so deeply about the Traveler, as they do get easily replaced in those cases. Like yes, the Traveler is comparable to a C0 Odette somewhat, if you're getting a C1 Odette, or a C1 or R1 of the stellar DPSs, the Traveler is less comparable in those situations. But if you're just a very low spender or free to play, this is not something that really matters to you. In which case, Cryo Traveler, great. I'm still shocked Hoyoverse is giving us a character this strong for free. And I kind of wish we knew about how strong the Cryo Traveler was going to be before Sandrone was such a strong pull recommendation, but whatever. But with that, I think I have nothing much else to say, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you're going to be building your Cryo Traveler or not, as I would love to hear it and I respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, thank you so much for your continued support. It means the world to me. I love you all. Thank you to everyone else for watching the video, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.